pretty sure the 2017 Honda Civic Type R is the best sport compact car money can buy. But the rest of the AutoGuide team was quick to remind me that it's not the only sport compact car you can buy. So how could I forget the Volkswagen Golf R, Ford Focus RS, and Subaru WRX STI? Three cars that prove there are still a few awesome alternatives on the market. And that's why we've gathered them here today to take on the Type R in a showdown for sport compact supremacy. What makes sport compact cars so great is their combination of everyday usability and pure performance ability. So we want to see how they handle all of the above. And that means testing them on both winding roads and a twisting track. It also means putting professional shoe Dave Pratt behind the wheel of each at the 1.5-mile Toronto Motorsports Park to see which can circle the track the fastest. You know, if you've read or watched anything about this new Civic Type R since it launched last month, you'll know that pretty much everyone has been blown away by the performance of it. And that's anywhere from out on the road to out on the track. When you're driving this thing around town, yes, it is a little bit over the top, and not just stylistically. The performance, it is a little bit antsy, but it's definitely a usable daily driver. There's no reason you can't take this thing to work and home and still have a little fun with it on the way. It's pretty comfortable, it's pretty smooth. There's nothing too aggressive about the way it handles, which definitely has its pros and cons. The suspension can be pretty comfortable when you have it in comfort mode, but even in sport, it's not too bad, especially compared to a car like the Focus RS, which only has 2 settings, and those are stiff and stiffer. Now, out here on the track is where this car really shines, and it is absolutely fantastic. I had the privilege of driving this thing up in Montreal for the launch, and it was totally everything I hoped for and more. It was so impressive. And the good news is, all it's taken is just a few laps from each of AutoGuide.com's editors for them to feel the exact same way. This thing is so well balanced, but best of all, there's no torque steer, there's no understeer. It is just absolutely magical. Push it down the straightaway, and you've got 7,500 RPM to work with before you hit redline. And that means you can eat up a 1/4 mile at a time with no worries. It also has active rev match, so when you toss it into a turn, if you don't know how to heel and toe, the car will do the hard part for you. If you don't spend a lot of time at the track, you don't have to worry that this car is going to intimidate you and overpower you. It lets you be in control. Now, it can get a little slide happy, especially in R mode. When you turn traction control off, you do have to be a little bit more mindful of what you're doing, but it is a very usable car. And it's not just me who feels that way. Our pro shoe, Dave Pratt, who's had tons of experience in all kinds of cars, both at the professional level and when he's just having a little bit of fun, was blown away by this thing. And he said the exact same thing. It's just such a usable car. You don't have to be a veteran racer to be able to maximize its performance. Now, I don't know about those other cars. I definitely have spent tons of time in each of them at the track, but I personally don't think they stand a chance. If I had to guess, I'd say the Focus RS has the best chance of catching this thing, but I still think that this will be the fastest of the four when we put them each through their hot laps out here. And there's only one way to find out which one is gonna reign supreme.
So of course, as the Auto Guide mom, I am driving the most mature and responsible car of the bunch. And I say that because to a regular person, this just looks like a regular Golf. Like, there's nothing crazy like a big ass spoiler or colorful brake calipers that really give it away. And so it kind of blends into the crowd, and depending on what kind of car you want, that could be both a good thing or a bad thing. But on to the more important things. This Golf R is powered by Volkswagen's absolutely heroic turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. And that puts out 292 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. But it actually feels a little bit faster than those numbers might suggest. And it's really important to note that out of all the cars we have here today, the Golf R is the only one that comes with the option of a manual and an automatic transmission. And of course, I'm always going to prefer a manual, but this 6-speed DSG is actually one of the best dual clutches in the market, and having it in this Golf R doesn't even make the drive any less fun. Of course, this 6-speed DSG sends power to all 4 wheels, just like every other car we have here except for the Type R. And the DSG is just really snappy and smooth, and the shifts are quick and well timed. So even out here on a track, you barely ever have to use the paddle shifters. So out here on the track, it is not as good as the other sport compacts here. Although it is quick and it is nimble, it does have a tendency to understeer from time to time, which is something that you don't really feel on the road. And considering that a lot of Golf R drivers probably aren't tracking it, it's not a huge deal. Something else to keep in mind is that our pro driver took the Golf R out on a hot lap to set some hot blazing times, and he was actually held back a little bit by the Golf R's brakes, which were a little bit finicky, and it slowed down his lap time by quite a bit. One thing I think Volkswagen could do a little bit differently with the Golf R next time is to spruce up the interior a little bit, because to me it just looks like any other Golf out there. And while I'm okay with its exterior looks being a little bit sleepy, I would enjoy a bit more sporty flair inside just to make it more fun for me and to help Volkswagen justify the higher price premium over the regular Golf. The Golf R's sleeper exterior also carries into how it drives. In regular mode, it's a little bit too quiet and subdued, but once you flip it into race mode, its whole personality kind of changes, and it just wakes up and becomes a lot more alive. It's faster, it's more responsive, and it's even a little bit more growly. But it's not so growly that it makes you feel like an idiot, and it's just loud enough to make you want to have a little bit of extra fun with it. So in the end, the Golf R isn't the quickest, it isn't the best driving, but it might be the most well-rounded of the bunch and the easiest to live with day to day.
I know some people must be rolling their eyes at the inclusion of the WRX STI in this comparison, as in it's not a hatchback at all. But when it comes to compact sports cars, this is the old guard. This is the dinosaur that's been around since the early 90s. People know and recognize the Subaru WRX STI, thanks to all those wins in World Rallycross Championships and a recent win at the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. Drivers absolutely love knowing that Subaru has all that hardware on their mantle. And truthfully, I believe that this car is the least compromised of all of the other cars out here. It is a speed machine. It's built only for one thing, and that's for going around a track. But that means that there's a pretty big trade-off when you take it on the road. This car has no fancy driver assistance features or safety features like some of the other vehicles here. In fact, all there is a blind spot monitoring system that sometimes turns on when somebody is fast enough to be in your car's blind spot. There's no adaptive suspension setup as well, meaning that this car is stiff all the time, and the clutch is really unforgiving and really harsh, which makes it kind of easy to stall. The shifter is also super notchy, and you know what? All of these qualities add up to one thing, and that's a vehicle that's kind of difficult to live with on a daily basis. Under the hood is the familiar 2.5-liter turbocharged boxer 4-cylinder engine that we know and love, and it still makes 305 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque. It's sent to all four wheels through a very clever driver-controlled center differential, meaning that you can dial in extra bias to the front or to the rear, although you're not going to really want to do that until you hit the track. But as I said before, this car is a little bit of a dinosaur. The transmission, clunky, hard to use, but it's this powertrain that's really weird. The engine really doesn't build a lot of boost until later in the rev range, so there's a lot of turbo lag. But once it hits hard, and you are off. If there's one thing I absolutely love about this car, it's gotta be the steering. This is an old school, hydraulically assisted setup, which means that there's tons of feedback, and you always know what the car is doing whenever you push it. But I have to bring up the interior, which is another thing that makes this car a little bit more difficult to live with. I mean, the infotainment system is dated and slow, and the entire dash is a little bit ugly. In fact, in terms of interior design, I have to say this is the most unattractive vehicle of the bunch we have here today. But who wants to talk about interior design when it comes to a car that's as focused as being on the track as this one is? The Subaru WRX STI, I'm telling you, this thing has tons of power. It never feels really behind in terms of horsepower, even though it has 50 less ponies than that Focus RS. And sure, the engine does sound a little bit like a tractor, and it doesn't have those neat popping noises that the Focus has, or that weird resonator or intake noise that the Type R has. But still, it's a funky sounding car, and it works great on our test track here. Additionally, take a look at those bright yellow brake calipers. They can handle the abuse of a track day all day long. The only thing I would criticize about this car in terms of on-track performance has to be these tires. The Yokohama Advanced Sport V105s just don't seem as grippy or bitey as the other tires that these cars are using. But they do last quite a bit, and I don't find myself having to pit and cool down as often as the other cars are. Simply put, this car is an old school speed machine. It's nothing super modern like the other cars that we have here today. It's not high tech or advanced, but it gets the job done all the same. If you're someone who's a little bit of a Luddite, you're gonna fall in love with this Subaru.
And right now, of course, I am in the hellaciously quick Ford Focus RS. Now, just to recap, what we've got under the hood is a 2.3-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. Delivers plenty of boost, if not all that much eco. What's it rated at? Well, as a refresher, you get 350 horsepower, 350 pound-feet of torque, the most in this grouping by far. This engine is tuned for torque. It pulls really well at low speeds in high gears. So in the Subaru, for instance, it's very choppy. If you're in second gear at low speeds, it'll shake the whole car. This you can lug down to idle, no issues whatsoever. Now, that engine is matched to a slick 6-speed manual transmission. I think it's one of the best on the market right now. The gates are just super smooth. It's easy to shift, and you never get lost. Another knock against the Subaru, I think, is that the shifter is very long through the gears, and on multiple occasions while kind of hustling it around the track here, I found myself getting lost, going into 5th instead of 3rd, hitting 2nd instead of 4th. It's just not that great, plus it feels gritty. This one, second to the Honda, hands down. It's very close to the Honda, not quite as precision, but it's still an excellent way to change gears, so no complaints there. Another nice thing about this Focus RS, the clutch engagement. I find it broad and very easy to modulate. It makes this car quite easy to drive on the street, which is always a welcome attribute for a car that aims to be rather practical, like a hatchback. It also sounds fantastic. I don't know how much of this engine note is being picked up by my microphone here, but it's got an open element air filter that really lets that engine howl. Plus, the exhaust will fart and pop like none of the other cars here. Now that may seem a bit juvenile, but I actually think it's quite entertaining. So many of today's cars are quiet, are hushed, and the Focus here is not afraid to make a little bit of noise. Now as for steering, it's super quick on center. This car will change directions in the blink of an eye. It gives you a really nice connected feel. Now, another nice attribute of this car is its willingness to rotate. Thanks to the all-wheel drive system, you can roll on the throttle in a corner and the ass end will swing out, making it feel almost like a rear drive vehicle, which is tons of fun, especially on track. Now, where the Focus RS really starts to fall apart, though, is sort of in real-world use out on the street, because it's getting kind of old right now. The interior isn't as nice as the Civics, to be certain. It's a little bit cheap in some areas. Also, the cabin is very cramped. There's limited storage in here, plus the cargo area, by my math, is about 1/3 smaller than the Type R's, which is a huge difference for a hatchback. You buy these cars for practicality, and this one is just not as big as the Honda. Also, these seats are super aggressively bolstered, which is fantastic out on the track, but kind of a pain to live with. And if you're any larger than I am, which is, I don't know, pretty much everyone except Jody Lai, you're gonna hate these things. Really hate them. Another problem with the RS is that the ride is just brutally stiff. It's great on track, like many of this vehicle's other attributes, but in the real world, it's just a little bit too starchy to be practical.
So after putting all four through their paces both on the street and the track, the results are in, and there were a few surprises as well as a few results we could have predicted right from the start.
I really like the Golf R, and I know it's not as exciting or fun to drive as the other cars here, but it is really well-rounded and easy to live with.
Subaru took everything they know about racing and stuffed it into the WRX STI, which means it's a monster on the track, going lap after lap without needing to slow down. But in comparison to the rest of these cars, it's a bit of a dinosaur. Its powertrain is unrefined, and the car's a little too harsh for the everyday commute.
In RS trim, the Focus is sharper than a surgeon's scalpel. It's a real enthusiast car, especially when driven in anger. But just like Sammy's STI, it's real-world usability where it comes up short.
Which brings us back to the Civic Type R. Aesthetically speaking, this thing borders on offensive, but when it comes to performance, it's absolutely lights out. Add in a starting price that's the lowest of the four we have gathered with us today, and it's hard to argue with the value it brings to the table. And at the end of the day, it was easier to come to a consensus than I thought. When it comes to buying a sport compact car, the 2017 Honda Civic Type R is hard to beat.
And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the AutoGuide.com YouTube channel to get all of our latest features and vehicle reviews.